so when I found out that there was this career called a social worker, that their main job was to help people find resources, I thought that's for me. All right. Well, I'm Stephanie Zyga, and I grew up in a Christian family and went through Christian high school, Christian college, and then graduated with a bachelor's in social work. And after that, I married my husband, Dave, who was joining the military right after we got married, which has really been a defining thing for all of the second half of my life, right? Is kind of following him around with the military as a military spouse. We have bounced around from, we got married in Michigan, and then we moved to Virginia for a year and a half, and then Florida for 2 years, and then California for 7 years, but we lived in 2 different places while in California, and then Arizona for 3 years, and then here. So we've been married 17 years, and the military has really been a huge part of all of that. I have 3 kids, and they are 3 girls, 13, 9, and 3. Nope, 4. I know how old my kids are. And yeah, I've been a stay-at-home mom for a while now. Since Lena was born, really. I've worked a couple times and done a lot of volunteer work during the last 13 years. But yeah, my career, as it would be, I like I said, I graduated with a bachelor's in social work, and then I worked for a bit and then got a master's in social work as well. And I did a lot with child welfare. That was probably the most that I did. I also worked with some batters intervention, some domestic violence groups. I did some counseling through the Fleet and Family Support Center for an internship during my master's. So that was more counseling related. A lot of what I did was home visits, just needs assessments and individual and family counseling and education in their homes. One was for children at risk of being removed because they had been referred to the system for abuse or neglect. Another was for families that were already removed, or children that had already been removed and they had been placed with family members, like an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent. And so instead of going into the foster system, they went with a kin, right? And so those people needed a lot of support to figure out how to raise children that were not their own, and children who'd come from a pretty broken place, in order to keep them in the home, or in their family's home, not their family of origin, but their kin home. They needed a lot of support. So I worked with them for a while. I also worked in a group home for kids that had been removed because of behavior issues. It was a boys' home that I was very unprepared for. It was not my favorite, but that was a short stint. So those were my big jobs, pre-babies, with my social work stuff. That's pretty much my synopsis about me. Right. So all throughout high school, I was very involved in our youth group and our church, and through the Christian high school that I went to, we did a lot of service projects, both locally and around the country, and like week-long mission trips and stuff like that. And I thrived through those. I felt incredibly fulfilled each time we were out doing those things, just seeing needs around me and then doing something about them. Just, that's what drove me. I really just found purpose there. And when I got to college thinking, okay, well, I'll go into business or something, like I didn't know, I had enjoyed my jobs that I worked at in high school. I worked for this amazing little flower shop little home decor shop. And I thought that's fun. I'll do that. And then I got to college and found out that there was a whole career you could do where you help people. I did not know that existed. Probably because I came from a fairly, easygoing family that didn't have any kind of need for a social worker. I didn't even know that existed in high school, which is shocking to me now that I think about it. But so when I found out that there was this career called a social worker, that their main job was to help people find resources, I thought that's for me. I think I could do that. And I think that it would be super fulfilling. And yeah, I wasn't wrong. I had no idea when I first went into it how vast the field was. I mean, social work has such a big range. I mean, you could work in schools, you could work in a hospital, geriatrics, working with older people. There's all this grief, death, and dying. There's a whole field just related to that, right? The child welfare portion is just such a small part of it, but it really is what you think of when you think of a social worker generally. But there's a lot that is available in that field. And that was exciting to me too, that I didn't know what I would want to do. I just knew that there was a population out there that I wanted to help. While going through college, I really enjoyed all of my child development classes and all of the child and family system classes that I was taking. So it was kind of an easy on-ramp into the child welfare system. With social work, you generally have to do some practicums or some interim or internships. And so that's kind of how you get your first job, right? Is you do your internship, and a lot of times they hire you out of that. And that's exactly what had happened to me. All the while going through school, I just kept thinking, I think these classes are just going to make me a better mom. I'm not really sure that happened. I think I have a lot of knowledge of what it means to be a good mom. That's not to say that I always do it, but I remember thinking that in college, like this is stuff turned out. God led me to being a stay-at-home mom for a long time. So it was not all for naught, is what I can go back to with that. But yeah, I chose it because I knew it would be fulfilling. I knew that it wasn't going to be something that I was just earning $1. Turns out that's all you earn. Social work, not a lot of money in it. So you have to do it because it feels right? It feels like you're doing something for the betterment of another person's life. It's a sacrifice. It's definitely not something that you do to get rich or to get a lot of accolades. It just can't be, because there's a lot of work and a lot of pain and not a lot of payment. So, but being young and idealistic, that didn't matter to me. And I think that that's where a lot of college students are too, is just being young and idealistic, and I can change the world. And I liked that. I wanted to make a difference. Right. Seeing success, right? The families that you work with, where you provide them the water that they need to drink, and they drink it and it gets better. Hugely rewarding, just beautiful. Building relationships with people I think it's fairly easy for me to build relationships with people, which is probably another reason why social work appealed to me, because it's all about relationships, right? It's about building rapport with people and then getting them from point A to point B. And I really, really enjoyed building relationships with so many people. I really did enjoy building those relationships and then helping them get from point A to point B when it worked. I actually just recently went through some old social work stuff that I had boxed up, and I found this card from one of my clients that, I mean, like, I just sat there and cried, because she had written me this thank you, that what we had done for her had meant so much. And now she and her 2 children were going to have this different trajectory for themselves than they would have before we arrived. And that, oh man, that's fulfilling. That's good stuff. So when it works, it's beautiful. It's very, very, I don't know, it just feels like God's work, right? It feels like I'm doing something with my skills to help another person. I felt like that's what we're called to do anyway. I was just getting paid for it. Not very much. Man, I could name a million hard parts. One for sure is keeping a balance when there's the failures, right? Because there are going to be so many families, so many people that you give them all you can give them, all the resources, all the next steps. And there's going to be all kinds of systems in place for long ingrained family dysfunction. And for whatever reason, they don't take that next step. They don't. You've shown them the way and they don't do it. And that is heartbreaking when you can see the other side and you feel like you've shown them the other side and you've shown them the way to get there. They don't take it. That can feel hugely, it just feel like a failure, right? You feel like I did my best and it wasn't enough. So there's a balance there of having thick skin and knowing that it's not always you. That's there. I think social workers can, especially new ones, can have a savior complex, right? Like we want to just get in there and rescue and save, and you're not going to be able to all the time. And that's really hard to watch when families fall apart. Bad things still happen. More things keep happening. It's like you get in there for the initial crisis, and then the next week there's another crisis, and the next week there's another crisis. And sometimes people live from crisis to crisis to crisis. And that's hard to watch. It's painful. So that's definitely one big challenge, is like keeping that empathy without becoming hard-hearted or burnt out when those painful things keep happening, because it's burnout's huge, right? I mean, can you imagine walking into pain all day long, every day, and then being able to walk out the same bubbly person that you were at the beginning of the day, every day, right? So keeping that balance of empathy, but not being broken, not being burnt out. Because you can't be effective if you're not empathetic. You can't be effective if you don't actually feel with them. But how do you feel with them without taking it on as your own and letting it like kill you? So that was a huge challenge, I think. Oh, seeing change and building relationships, for sure. Just seeing success. There's just nothing like it. Seeing kids succeed where they otherwise would fail, seeing parents succeed where they otherwise would fail, seeing generational things that have happened generation after generation, and then when you watch the trajectory change, that's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Definitely, let's see. Keeping healthy boundaries, right? You need to be able to build rapport with your clients. So you need to give part of yourself to that, right? You have to, in order to connect to somebody, you have to give part of yourself to them. But there has to be boundaries, and keeping those boundaries is very difficult. That was a challenge for me, for sure. And then not taking it home, taking all that pain home. I know, yeah, I've got a lot of stories that probably shaped me a lot, right? Because they were things that happened, things that went down, things that I saw, all that stuff that you just can't walk away from and not be changed. That was tricky, for sure. And then just looking at systems, being idealistic about, you learn this stuff in school. These are the systems, this is the brokenness, blah, 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 blah. But then actually being in it in the real world and you think, I can do it, I can change it, it's going to be okay, I've got the resources. No, you don't. Sometimes, yeah, but you're up against a lot. And I think it was very destabilizing or disillusioning to realize that I couldn't change the world in a single day and any day. I wasn't the superhero that I wanted to be. And yet I was doing small things that made big differences um, down the road occasionally, right? And like being okay with those small successes without being burnt out. Yeah. Right. You need to be really good with people, right? You need to be able to quickly build rapport, because people that you are working with are already coming in to your relationship with a distrust for the system because of why they're there, why they're where they're at. And so you're already up against some barriers. So you need to be good with people. You need to be able to listen well, empathize with them. And that doesn't mean affirming what they're doing always, but right, like just really hearing them, and being able to show that you're here for them, to build that relationship quickly. Because sometimes it's a quick relationship. Sometimes you work with a client for years. Sometimes you might only get a couple chances. And I don't want any of my chances to be wasted, right? I don't want to meet with a client with all the intention of down the road, we're going to get to this, when I might only get that one chance to really show them Jesus. Like in the end, isn't that what we're doing? Is like show them grace and mercy in a different way. And here's how you get to the different way. So, right, good people skills, huge. Good people skills, good listening skills. And then another really good attribute, I think, is, which I was not good at, but I want to touch on, is humility. I think it is really, really tempting for people in helping professions to work from a platform of us, them, which can lead to a lot of self-righteousness, right? I would never. Now, when I was doing parenting education before I had children, there was a whole lot of I would nevers. As a parent now, I have. Do you know what I mean? I think I would probably do my parenting education differently now than I did when I was 24 and hadn't had any children yet. So I think that there is a very, very tempting place of self-righteousness that we can be working from. And so keeping humble, right? You have not been in these people's shoes. You have not walked their road. You have not walked the opportunities or lack thereof that they have had. You have not walked in their family. You do not know what they're up against. So keeping that humility to be like, I don't know what you're going through, but I want to walk it with you. And I want to show you what there is available for you to be able to walk out a different way. So yeah, humility, huge. Not something I'm good at, but it's a good attribute to have. And then I think another one is just being tenacious, right? Like not giving up. There's your clients are going to want to give up, right? That it's why they're at where they're at half the time, is because life is hard and they haven't gotten to where they need to be for some reason with alongside them and push them to the next step. You can't be the one that gives up. So yeah, just hanging on and walking with them through the hard things. So being able to be tenacious is a good one. Oh my word. How does my career affect my family life? Remember I mentioned that word boundaries before? So I did not have children while I was actually actively doing social work stuff. I have done a lot of volunteer work while having children, but it's different. But even while married, I will tell you a story about, I'm like horribly embarrassed by this story, but I'll tell you anyway. I was working in a batterers intervention group, right? So domestic violence, right? These generally men, I was working with only men, who have been controlling over their partners. They have been physically, emotionally, verbally abusive, and they are in this group to learn it differently, to not be this in the future. These are very difficult groups to work in. It is very difficult to work as a woman in this group, right? Because there's a lot of very basic ingrained attitudes that some of these men have towards women that led to some of the problems that they're facing, right? And I remember working hard with them, listening to their stories, and walking away from that experience with a new set of goggles that I was looking through in my marriage. And suddenly I was looking for evidence of controlling behavior everywhere. And do you know that when you look for the color green, you'll see it everywhere? If you look for a new car that you just discovered, you will see it everywhere. And so all of a sudden, I'm looking for controlling behavior everywhere, and I'm finding it everywhere. My husband is not controlling. He is not abusive. But I was pinpointing, I was projecting what I was seeing at work onto him, and then I was fighting back. And I cannot tell you the amount of damage I did in our marriage because I was looking for something that wasn't there, finding it, and then fighting it. And the poor man is probably like, I don't even know what's happening. But that was what I was doing. And it wasn't until I stepped away, stopped doing the group, started to really get into prayer about this, that it was okay, you're finding things that aren't there. Stop it. Right. But I was projecting what I was seeing at work into my family. Even now I've got parenting examples. Some of the things that I saw at work have resulted in great parenting strategies for me, right? I won't do this because I saw how it failed here, blah, blah, blah. But there's been some things that maybe aren't as productive. Oh, this is a sad story, but we had a client who, while intoxicated, was co-sleeping and rolled over on her baby and suffocated her baby. This was while she was in parenting education with us. And we had warned her of the dangers of co-sleeping. But going through that, where that baby died kind of on our watch, was pretty traumatic. I felt like somehow we had failed that child, right? Fast forward a couple years, I've got my own brand new baby, and I absolutely refuse to co-sleep with her because I'm terrified of rolling over on her. And I'm not intoxicated, but I'm still afraid of suffocating my child. So much so that she was in a bassinet next to our bed, right? Like a co-sleeper next to the bed. And I still couldn't sleep because she was in there. And I was afraid that I would be sitting up in bed, nursing her, falling asleep, and then I would hurt her somehow. And 6 weeks into this new baby, my mom was visiting, and I hadn't slept in weeks because I had this weird thing. There are people that co-sleep and do it fine and do it for years, right? It's not me, but many people do. And I was so traumatized by that, or so shaken by that experience, that I could not sleep with the baby in the room. And my mom goes, Stephanie, you need to get that child out of your room. I put her in her crib in her own bed. She was fine. And I slept for the first time in weeks. And that was it. That was it for sharing rooms with babies for me, because there was something in my past in working with young children with poor parenting strategies that had just caused this in me that I couldn't do that. There are some people that co-sleep and it's just fine. It wasn't going to be for me. So yeah, I think taking those things that you see, that pain, that brokenness at work, and not projecting it on your families, not looking for dysfunction that isn't there, was probably a huge way that it has even now affected my family, right? And then in some ways it's good. There are things that I understand about children, about development, about development, I guess, and how their brains work, and how that I probably wouldn't have known had I not gone to school for this, had I not worked with it, to be able to recognize, oh, this is what she's going through. I know how to work with that because I've worked with it before, right? So I think it has made me a better mom in the end. I hope. I don't know. They might disagree. Faith life. when you're working in social work, you're going to see a lot of pain. You are going to see broken families and broken systems and injustice everywhere, and insufficiency of resources, insufficiency of protective protective resources around, right? Like there is a broken system that we have to work in. And you just see a lot of pain. And nowhere in my life have I recognized how much we need a savior after working with people outside of my comfort zone, right? Because I know why I need a savior, but it looks a lot different than where some people that come from different opportunities, different backgrounds, why they need a savior, right? The pain is different. Hard is hard. Everybody's got hard. But that type of pain that I watched working with abusive families is we need a savior. Like we need God to come and bring heaven on this earth now. And he's going to do that through us, right? And then eventually when Jesus comes back, there's going to be this new heaven and this new earth, and lions are going to lay down with lambs. And when I think of lions and lambs, I think of abusive parents and their children, right? Like, I mean, that gets fixed someday. And there's hope in that. There's hope in that. And I think that I look forward to Jesus's return more because of the pain that I've seen in social work. Wow, I'm getting all cheery. Okay, so. Sure. I absolutely recommend it. I think that this is a huge need. I think there is a huge need for people who are willing to give of themselves for this. They're not going to be rich. They're not going to make a ton of money. They're going to do it because it's meaningful. And I think that there'll be rewards on the other side of this life for that. I think that they need to do a lot of soul searching to find out what will be triggering for them and work through those things. No one can't do social work, but we all come from something that's been broken in our past. Like, I don't care who you are, everyone has something that they've walked through that is going to be triggering for them. And so I think finding a good friend or counselor or pastor to work through some of those feelings before starting to work with clients is wise. I think that we all have stuff to work through. I think developing your listening skills and your people skills, just take whatever opportunity that you can to just really work with people and see people and love people and listen to people. You have a lot more to learn than you have to give. Always, everybody does. So continuing to look for ways to know people, learn people. And with that, like, really practice empathy, okay? Like, really try to see the world through other people's shoes. We do not all walk through the same realities. We just don't. So walking through life in a non-judgmental stance where we can say, this person is not me. They have had different paths, different opportunities, different boundaries, different barriers that have caused them to see a different world than I see. Have empathy towards that, right? And then with that, really, you want to have that empathy, but you also want to learn to develop your boundaries, right? Because you got to be able to walk into this job with thick skin and empathy. And that's really hard. So learning those boundaries on the front end will save you a lot of heartache and will keep that burnout at bay, I think. And honestly, I think especially for Christian girls that want to do this kind of work, like, pray. Just really, really, really be in the word to understand God's justice, understand God's will for his world. Pray for your own heart to be soft, but not so soft that it breaks easily, right? And then really pray for wisdom to know what your job is and what your job is not. Because there are going to be some things that only God can fix. And if you take that on as your own, you're going to feel like a failure a lot. And so praying for wisdom, what is my job and what is it not, is huge. Um, I think I chose that initially because it was interesting. I felt like I knew families. I had come from a good family. I felt like I could offer something there. I loved little kids. I I wanted to make a difference in the lives of young kids, and my heart just broke for the thought that there would be kids growing up in families that hurt them or families that could be better, right? I mean, they could just, if they had a little bit more resources, if they had a little bit more education, it could go better for them. And that just seemed like such a um, like investing in those children was investing in all of our futures, and that felt right at the time.